Do you remember base Monster Hunter Rise? I do. And it's a time a lot of us wish to forget. Maybe you loved the game, and if you did, that's fine. More power to you. If anything, I'm a little jealous. But a lot of people, a significant amount of people, myself included, felt that Rise, at least the base game, was arguably the worst Monster Hunter game. I even saw this comment on Reddit. I know it was just one comment, but I'm sure a lot of people felt this way. That Rise could be considered the first truly bad Monster Hunter game. And that's just a mind blowing statement, right? Like, Monster Hunter isn't a franchise that you typically associate any of its games with being bad, unless it's the first game, but that's really because it suffers from first game syndrome where it was really rough, really old, really outdated, janky, and a slew of other problems that just made it really hard to play, and especially if you try going back to play, it's miserable, right? But that's more bad in terms of the physical quality of the game. Rise has a lot more quality for sure, but it still felt extremely lacking. And I feel like I would sound like a broken record by stating all of the things that were wrong with base Rise. We all know what they were, but because the human mind likes hearing things that it agrees with, that's just how you feel validated. I'm going to say them anyway because I know a lot of you probably want to hear it. Rise was bad for the following reasons. First of all, it was way too easy. Like, easy for a standard that we had. What's the word? A standard that we accustom ourselves to. Perhaps it was a standard set by Capcom, one we made ourselves, or maybe comparisons with other action RPGs. Whatever the case may be, we felt the game was extremely easy, and it absolutely was. It was arguably as easy, if not easier, than base Monster Hunter World, which is already a very easy game, probably the easiest Monster Hunter game. So what made Rise so easy? Well, it was a number of things. Monsters weren't quite balanced enough for the speed that hunters could output. We had Wirefall, which couldn't really be punished all that well. Monsters simply couldn't punish wirefalling very successfully, so you ended up getting hit, not taking much damage because the monsters simply didn't hit hard enough. So there was really no punishment for getting hit at all. You could get hit as much as you wanted, and you could just hyper armor and counter through monsters. It was mindless, right? It was an effortless, mindless hack and slash where you could just slam yourself into the monsters with no effort, not thinking about anything, and win with no issue at all. There was no challenge in the game. There were some event quests, a few select monsters, some advanced quests post-launch that were kind of difficult, I guess, but it was just too little too late. It didn't really add to the longevity of the game, which is another issue I'm going to address now. The end game, while it technically existed, it was such a shallow, such a half-baked end game, it wasn't really considered an end game at all by most people. Like, yes, technically, it was there, but it wasn't really. So, the end game of base Rise. Sorry if my voice is a little raspy. I'm getting over a cold. Just have the leftovers. But anyway, I'm going to take a sip of water, actually. The end game of base Monster Hunter Rise was talisman farming. You go to the melder, and you melt talismans until you get something good. It's to optimize your builds, obviously. Typically, you wanted 2-slot talismans with some Wex, maybe some crit boost or crit eye. Just 2 slots with skills that you wanted. But honestly, you didn't even really need that. You could really just get away with any 2-slot talisman. Yes, having extra skills were nice, but they weren't necessary in the slightest because the game is so easy. Well, it was. I'll get to that. The game was so easy that there was nothing to optimize for. There was no reason to get better or improve your builds. Ratatosker, in particular, if you watched his review of Base Rise, and I'm sure a lot of us did, he said, what am I going to optimize for? So I can kill Kushel in 3 minutes instead of 4? the monsters weren't a threat. So you could really just meld a 2-slot talisman, which took basically no time at all, make your builds with that, and you were good to go pretty much forever. And even more unfortunately, the only real ways of farming talismans, like the juice to meld them, was in 1.0 spamming Narwa and nothing else, which was already really boring because Narwa was extremely easy, like most monsters in base Rise. And obviously, nobody wants to just fight one monster for the entire endgame. So then we got the 2 updates that rolled out. Then the best method became honestly even worse, because now instead of hunting monsters, I mean, you could still use the Narwhal method, but there was technically a more optimal way: Wyvern riding into a Valstrax to make it drop Crimson Liquid, and then simply leaving the quest and melding talismans with that. So that was even worse. You weren't even really hunting at that point. There was even less challenge because you were just Wyvern riding the whole endgame. I didn't even participate in it because I thought it was so pointless. Many of us thought it was pointless. All to meld a talisman you didn't really need because everybody already had 2 swatters, and there was no content on the horizon to merit making builds better with it. It was a nothing endgame that resulted in nothing. It was truly empty and pointless. So when you combine Rise's pointless, empty endgame, which isn't even an endgame at all, to be honest, with how effortlessly easy it was, the game basically had no replayability. There was no real reason to play past the credits, at least until you reach Valstrax. Like, yeah, sure, reach HR 100, unlock Valstrax, at least complete the game, right? And if you were like me, if you really wanted to squeeze every last drop of content out of Rise, you probably would at least go through and complete all optional quests, all event quests as they release, just so you can get check marks and everything. It was content to consume, it was something to do. So if you're complaining about a lack of content in Rise, it was likely because you wanted to complete every single quest. If you were complaining about a lack of content and you didn't beat every quest, well, I mean, at that point, at least go clear all the quests. It's something to do. I did that, and I, at that point, could more justifiably complain about a lack of endgame content or something long-term to do. And as if my complaining could not end, because it's not going to end for a little bit. I'll get to the good part. You know what the good part is? It's coming. But you also had the Rampage, and most people didn't like Rampages. I certainly didn't like them. They were extremely easy. You could never lose them, really. It just wasn't very fun because it was just ballista cannon shooting simulator with minimal combat. You didn't need to focus on the monsters at all. You could just mash into them and they'd go away. It's, once again, just a very pointless, empty feeling system. Like, yes, technically Rampages were part of the end game. They got you outfit vouchers to farm for Lairds, but nobody really liked doing them. We did get one hard Rampage at the very end of Base Rise. It was the Ragehang Rampage. That was the only hard one. It actually took considerable effort to beat. But we left the base game feeling like, wow, I do not want to do Rampages again. If you enjoyed them, great. More power to you. Me and many others did not. And then event quests. This was content to consume every week. It was, at the very least, a reason to boot up the game on a weekly basis, which I did, more or less for the most part. I did still want to complete all quests. Sometimes I wouldn't log in for a week because I just didn't care. I would sometimes wait a few weeks and then do a bunch of event quests at once. But, you know, on average, I still had a reason to play the game for a few minutes, maybe an hour, if I had to farm the event quest for a new Laird every week. It was still so little. And it was a source of a lot of the Twitter drama. I mean, probably you remember, when Capcom would announce a new event quest for Base Rise, the Twitter comments were just a mess. It was just people so angry and unhappy. And look, a lot of them worded it very toxically. I don't agree with the way it was worded, but they also weren't wrong. Their complaints were still valid, even if hostilely worded. With a few exceptions, there were some good event quests like the Akuma collabs, Sonic, that one Ibushi slaying quest in the Coral Palace. That was pretty nice. There were good event quests, but a lot of them were very lackluster. A lot of them just kind of felt like this could be an investigation in world. This is basically just an optional quest, but dressed up as an event. Like, the events felt very, very weak. They largely just awarded stickers, gestures, titles, which most people largely didn't care about. And all of this stuff combined just made Rise feel bad. We got so little hours out of Rise. Like, yeah, we got maybe a few hundred hours, which is great for most video games, but that's not what we expect from a Monster Hunter game. A Monster Hunter game should be keeping you playing longer than that. I put well over 3,000 hours, almost 4,000 hours into World and Iceborne over the course of 3 years, and I'm sure a lot of us did too. World had so much to do all the time. You might remember, particularly Rage Gaming made several videos talking about the subject, how the event quest lineup was poor, there was no end game. Like, Rise was in this place where there were so many complaints about so many different things that the game felt dead. It felt awful. Like, the amount of negative, controversial videos, even if Josh himself was wording it respectfully, I could tell he definitely felt the same way. He was more polite about it. He was more sophisticated and controlled with how he was stating the problems with Rise. It definitely wasn't the Twitter drama that was unfolding, and he was certainly reading that too. But a Monster Hunter game shouldn't make us feel so negative so often. He even made a video talking about how, like, he wanted to play Rise, but he couldn't. There was no drive, nothing to really make him obsess over it. We wanted to obsess over the game. We love obsessing over Monster Hunter. We like having a lot to do. He and Ratatosker had the same emotion of, we want to keep playing, but we can't. It's like, I'm not done with Rise, but it feels like Rise is done with me. I'm not done. I don't feel done. I want to play more, but there's no reason to play more. And not everyone is blessed with the ability to play a game for the sake of playing it, just for the sake of having fun. We like having something more, an incentive, a drive to keep us going, rather than just mindless playing for the sake of it. Like, the human mind can have fun, but we also want to have a reward with it. And Rise didn't really have either. The game was so easy, it was hard to have fun with it, and there was no reward for playing long term because there was nothing to do. You get the point, right? I've spent all this time talking about how, for lack of a better term, bad Rise was. It really did feel like the game sucked, which is not something Monster Hunter games usually do. They don't usually suck. That's just not a thing that happens. But here we go. We had Rise, and that was the closest we came to the game sucking. But here's the thing. It didn't suck. For a Monster Hunter game, sure, it probably did suck. For a video game, it was actually an amazing video game. Like, if you gave Rise to me when I was like an early teenager, and I had my PS2 and like 50 games to play, and I had Rise, I would probably not have complained about any of this. I would have obsessed over it and played it religiously, because 4 Ultimate set a standard. 4 Ultimate is the first Monster Hunter game that had an endgame. I played 3 Ultimate for well over 2,000 hours, and 3 Ultimate does not have an endgame. It's just like Rise. But the game is, while it's not overwhelmingly hard, it is definitely more difficult considerably. So some difficulty gave it some replay value, and we hadn't been conditioned to expect an endgame. 4 Ultimate was the first Monster with an endgame system. 3 Ultimate and all games beforehand didn't. It just wasn't something we expected or thought about. So it was easier to... I'm sorry. It's a lot of talking and my voice is raspy. I'm trying my best. But anyway, when you don't have the expectation of an endgame, your mindset changes. I remember in 3 Ultimate, I would just join random lobbies. We'd take turns posting whatever quests we wanted, whatever monsters we hunted, We'd even hunt like the invader monster. Like we'd hunt not just the quest objectives, but also whatever random unassigned monster showed up just because it was fun. It was great. In Rise, nobody feels that way anymore. Nobody feels like that with any modern game. We expect an endgame now because we're just so used to it, and we really want the drive to keep playing. So, after the 2 updates passed, the 2 months passed from launch, it already felt like we were done. We came off of World and Iceborne and Fatalis, which was amazing, and all those updates and all that content and camaraderie, it was amazing, to a game like Rise, and none of that was there. Absolutely nothing we loved about what made World and Iceborne so special, besides the fact that it's Monster Hunter, gave us that kind of joy. It just felt lifeless. In fact, the only reason I was even able to reach over HR 300 in Rise, because yes, I was over HR 300, was because I was helping 2 other people, my ex and my nephew, on 2 separate occasions, helping them complete all the quests for like 100% completion. So I effectively had to do every quest of the game thrice over, which is funny. So I ended up getting like much higher hunter rank than I would have playing alone. But, that was really the only content I had to do, was just playing the game again with other people. It was fun and all, but I just knew it was so dry. I was going to have nothing to do afterwards. Until, of course, after months of feeling this way, I've been spending the whole video building up to it. After months of misfortune, misery, and just dealing with a Monster Hunter game that wasn't all that fun, we got a glimmer of hope. At the beginning of a Nintendo Direct in September 2021, a light at the end of the tunnel. The announcement of Sunbreak was, of course, initially very exciting because, I mean, it's an expansion to a Monster Hunter game. Those are always a good time, right? It's a massive amount of new content. Everyone's going to love that, right? It's like, wow, we have a massive reason to play Rise again. We're getting a whole new rank, so many new monsters, new locales. It's going to be incredible. And yes, that is definitely true, but there was just a hint of doubt. After my initial excitement of the reveal, I had this sinking, creeping feeling of, but will it fix the game? And a lot of people felt this way. We were like, okay, yeah, Sunbreak, cool, a lot of new content, very exciting. Is it going to fix Rise, though? Or is it just going to be more content, but all the problems are still there? Because it's going to make the game more content rich for sure, but will it make the game flat out better? I mean, maybe at a base level, yes, but a lot of people, including myself, were worried that this wasn't going to help the game all that much. But eventually, of course, the game would launch, and we would get our answers. The base version of Sunbreak 1.0, showed a lot of promise. I mean, first of all, we just had so much more content to chew through, so that was going to keep us busy for at least another month. And as it turns out, 1 month was all we needed. I had ran through the expansion, completed all optional quests, made it to the afflicted monsters at the end, and I thought to myself, okay, this is something to do, but it was missing a number of things. I thought it had potential, but it felt like this still wasn't quite what we wanted. Yes, afflicted monsters were certainly very difficult. They absolutely were a massive step in difficulty above base rise, for sure. These monsters felt like they could seriously threaten me. But how good was the incentive? Well, there was some incentive. The afflicted materials were used to give you a max rarity version of every weapon in the game, giving it endgame strength. Okay, well, that's good, but how long is that going to last us? When we get all of our builds in order, it only takes a few parts to upgrade each weapon, and then we're just going to be done again, right? So it was this feeling of, I don't know, it's kind of an end game, but it's still just missing something. It misses something to really drive and push for. Like, we could see the potential. It was there. It just hadn't quite been realized yet. But even that worry was put to rest. The first title update of Sunbreak, and by the way, there was a whole roadmap. We were going to get 6 title updates, each adding several new monsters. That is a step above what Base Rise did. I mean, technically, Base Rise probably wouldn't have had updates at all, given that it was delayed by COVID. COVID affected it massively. The 2 updates were really just finishing the game. The game launched unfinished. Like that is another point against Base Rise, which is just yikes. Never has a Monster Hunter game launched unfinished. But regardless, the first title update of Sunbreak introduced anomaly investigations. And this is when everything came together beautifully. Anomaly investigations were the true endgame of Sunbreak. And this is when we had the grind that we desired for so long. These investigations did several things at once. Several things that Base Rise clearly lacked and absolutely needed. There were a lot of levels to grind through, which admittedly, some people didn't like how much there was to grind through. Like, just because it took so long to level them up, especially over the course of updates where we got more levels. But it was something to do, right? It was a lot to do. You were fighting a vast variety of monsters, all of which were powered up faster, stronger, more dangerous. They incentivized you to get better. And they rewarded you with afflicted materials to augment your gear. This is amazing. We have our difficulty, we have our grind, and we have our drive to get better, get stronger. And all the while having several updates to look forward to for the next year. This was beautiful. It was like a dream come true. All of this gave Rise everything it needed. There was not a single thing I would have liked more. I mean, I guess, to be fair, it's not completely perfect. I would have liked if the final bosses, Ibushi, Narwa, and Geismagorm, got some kind of endgame relevancy, so that's a bit of a shame. But for the most part, it was basically perfect. Compared to Base Rise, it was perfect. I was playing the game constantly, loving the difficulty. It was so thrilling and engaging, and I was getting stronger. All of it. It was it was amazing. I consider Sunbreak a masterpiece. I grinded to Master Rank 999 naturally. I'm sorry. I didn't even have to like grind the rank arbitrarily for the sake of it. I just reached it naturally, which is unheard of for a Monster Hunter game. Having so much to do, you reach the max rank without even trying. Like, that's how much content there is. The addition of Risen Elders were amazing. They were what Arc Tempered should have been, because they had drastically different movesets. They were very fleshed out, welcome additions. They were relevant to the end game. Title updates like a Matsu. Wait, we got a Matsu in the 5th gen. That's beautiful. Primordial Malzeno. Flaming Espinus. We even got Espinus just in the game. Like, that's a point towards Sunbreak already. All of this came together to make it amazing. I consider it the best Monster Hunter game by far. It's so fun, so content rich, so difficult, unless you're Mezza Lounge, but we don't really care what they say. But if you think Sunbreak is too easy, you're too good at the game. That's a you problem. The game is difficult. The monsters are very fast, very strong. They got a lot of health to chew through, so you got to focus on that difficulty for so long. It's hard. The event quest lineup was a lot better. The event quests themselves were very difficult. There was just so much to do the whole year right up until the final update. And even though there's nothing left, even though the content has been chewed through, I'm happy. I don't need to ask for more because I couldn't ask for more. I got my fill of the game. I played it so much. I'm satisfied. Unlike Base Rise, even when I ran out of stuff to do in Sunbreak, I was ultimately satisfied by the end of it all. I felt like I got my money's worth. Like, yes, this is what I wanted Base Rise to be. It just has so few flaws. It's got some flaws, sure. It's not completely perfect. I know Curious Crafting, pretty controversial system. Even I'm not a huge fan of it. I can just kind of like, yeah, I can deal with it. And like I said, I'm upset that the final bosses weren't utilized in the endgame more. But it's fine. What the game gives me is amazing, and I could really just not ask for much more. I am very satisfied with Sunbreak. So, yeah, that's pretty much the video. It was hard for me to get through it all because I am coming off of a sickness. My voice, you can tell, is raspy. It doesn't like me talking this much. I didn't script this video either. I really am just talking off the cuff here. But I hope that was digestible for you all. I just had a lot of fun talking about my experience with Rise and Sunbreak. And you know what? We got Wilds coming soon. Maybe Wilds will usurp Sunbreak. Right now, Sunbreak is my favorite game. I'm hoping Wilds tops it, or at least Wilds Ultimate. We will see. We will see indeed. So, yeah, that is the story of how the worst Monster Hunter game, in my opinion. So, if I'm not going to speak objectively here, my least favorite became the best Monster Hunter game. One expansion was all it took for this game to go from rags to riches.